Monday, May 18th. I'm Rem.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geeknights. Tonight, a little bit about computer forensics.
Let's do this.
You know, I really hate to always have my kind of opening to the show be, yes, I was on the train and something crazy happened. But when you commute, to New York City and back every day, shit happens like almost every day.
Well, I think what it is that you have the routine of the train. So anything that's sort of, and a train has a lot of people on it. And it's sort of like, a train is like, for a lot of people, a train is a rare thing, right? So to have this thing that involves a whole lot of people and is actually sort of, rare, at least for people in the United States, in most places, when something happens with it that's non-routine, it's sort of, it makes for a story.
Well, plus just the commute is always in stark contrast to the rest of my day. I mean, once I'm in New York, the threshold above which I notice something is far higher.
That's true. On a quiet train ride, you're going to notice anything that goes out of the ordinary. But in the city, everything is out of the ordinary, so you don't notice anything.
I mean, in the city, crazy guy yelling, "Hib it, hab it, hib it, hab it, hib it, hab it," waving a knife, whatever. On the train, I'm watching out.
Exactly.
But
it's so right.
So I'm on the way home, and the trains are all messed up because they're doing this track work like north of us, like toward Poughkeepsie.
Yep.
So the train before mine, the local slow train, like the 445, it doesn't go all the way to Poughkeepsie anymore. It stops in Beacon, but no one pays attention to this fact. So I take the 509, which is like the express Beacon only train. And, the train's pulling up, and they go too far, so they're very slowly backing up. And I see on the platform about 100, maybe 200 people waiting to get on the train going the rest of the way to Poughkeepsie. The train that is full of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, the majority of which are getting off at Beacon.
No.
And none of these, they're all standing. The best part, they're all standing there, and there's this kind of chubby woman, and she's kind of standing right in front of the door that I'm in front of, waiting to get off the train. And this guy next to her kind of leans in, and he basically says to her, just loud enough I can hear through the door, you might want to get out of the way of that door.
That's true.
But I realized something. I never take the car over to the freeway. I always go right and go all the way around through Beacon because I'm not going anywhere. I think that more people take the train from Beacon who don't live in Beacon than who do live in Beacon.
It's probably true.
Just based on the number of cars. But more importantly, I've never done this before. There were 3 accidents between the train station and the exit or the entrance ramp to the freeway.
Whoa.
3!
Wow.
I have a feeling that is not that uncommon for there to be at least 2.
Huh? That's pretty crazy. Yeah.
Oh, there was almost a 4th. I finally get past all these accidents. I stop at a red light to turn right, and this teenage girl almost hits my car. She just didn't stop, and she screeches. She rolled down her windows, just yelling at me like, "What are you?"
Whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, the train had a slight problem for me today. The trains have doors on the ends of the cars, but some of the cars have a door in the middle. Basically,
unless you're on the good train, has the 2 doors at the midpoints.
Yeah. But anyway, the what's it called? So we get on the train in Grand Central, and it sort of doesn't leave. And I hear the doors opening and closing a whole bunch, and it should have left already. But
was a guy stuck in the door?
No. Basically, eventually, the conductors are like, "We have a problem with the doors. That has not been remedied." And the train starts moving, and then he's like, "As a result, the middle doors will not open. You have to use the end doors."
I gotta say, I like the conductors because whenever something goes wrong, they always take it in stride.
Yeah, because the conducting is a totally laid back job as long as no one tries to piss you off. And you know what? If someone does try to piss you off, it's like,
what do you care?
What are you gonna do?
If
you touch me, you go to jail for 7 years. All right? So I don't give a shit about your craziness. I'm totally protected. What are you going to do?
I got to admit, I always kind of enjoy the confrontations I periodically see between the conductors and belligerent passengers.
Well, that law is a little bit extreme, but on the other hand, it allows conductors to have the attitude necessary to do their job properly.
Yep.
It's like if right? If you're just a normal dude and you have the same protections as a normal dude, right? If you had to do the job of a conductor and deal with, people, there might be some situations where like maybe you would cave to some, angry people or whatever. But instead, because you know that like touching you is this horrendous felony that'll put you in jail for 7 years, right?
You know what's
You'll
like?
get in people's face. No one's gonna get in, get in your way.
What it's very much similar to. There's this old video. I'm sure you can find it on the internet somewhere. It was one of those, cop pulls up. There's the camera in the cop car filming him giving someone a ticket.
Yep.
And he gives the guy the ticket, and the guy's just like yelling and screaming and tearing up the ticket and freaking out. And after the guy stops talking, the cop's just like, if you don't pick up what you just threw on the ground, I'm going to give you another ticket for littering. And then the guy fucking loses it.
Yep. Yeah, so that's why conductors are always like, oh, you're not going to pay, huh? Like once I saw this like military dude, right? And he was in the military. He was actually, in for reals, not like some guy who was a military fanboy, right? And he looked like some sort of grizzled old commander type, right? And he was basically thought that because he was in the military, he should get a free train ride. At least that's what I, figured out what was going on. And he refused to pay, and the conductor didn't take his shit at all. And like the police, he got off the train, and the conductor had already called the police to get him for not paying for the train ticket, which is what they do.
But I think we need I am now going to pull the Jack Thompson policy on talking about the commute.
Uh-oh.
Can't talk about the commute unless the next story tops the last one told.
All right.
That way,
so don't have to top all the previous ones that were at that top the one we just did.
Because there are a few zingers out there that will never top.
All right, that's okay.
Plus, there's a ton of tech news. So what do you got?
There's a big ton. All right, so check this out. Right, we always talk about how people don't have balls. Right, there was there'll be some situation and there'll be some ballsy option. Right, but no one will ever take that ballsy option. Pirate Bay took the ballsy option.
Yep. The last emperor of Rome took the ballsy option.
That was too long ago. That doesn't count.
Still ballsy.
Perhaps. Right? But today, there were in the news right now, there are two people with balls, right? And the guy I want to talk about is this Harvard lawyer, right? And basically, he's going to go into court and defend this guy who was, this guy was illegally sharing copyrighted music. They're not even arguing that he wasn't. He did. He did it. He downloaded music or uploaded. I don't know. He did it. Right? And it was music that is, copyrighted. This lawyer is going to go in and he's going to try to argue that non-commercial peer-to-peer music sharing is fair use. Now, even Lawrence Lessig is like, you're totally wrong and nuts. That's not going to work. And you know what? I don't think it's going to work either. But morally, I think that's the right argument, and I respect his gigantic testicles, because they are so big.
Perhaps we should do a Thursday show on balls.
The beverage?
Maybe Moxie. Also the beverage?
I've never drunken the beverage. It comes in a blue bottle, right?
Balls does.
Yeah.
Moxie comes in basically a car battery.
Yeah.
Don't drink Moxie. That stuff is not good.
So you're going to get some hate mail for that from some Moxie fan somewhere.
You know what? If there's a Moxie fan, more power to you. You're welcome to it.
Yeah.
Good guy. I mean, I like weird soda. I mean, right here on my desk, I've got that Red Bull Cola, which is badass, by the way.
I tasted that. It tastes like shit.
Tastes like cola.
Ugh.
You just don't like cola.
It's disgusting. Anyway. No, but I mean, this is pretty interesting because, for example, right, there was the case, what was the one that we lost in the Supreme Court?
All the ones that have mattered for a long time now?
No, that big one was like EMI versus or BG. I forget it already. But anyway, they went in to argue, right? And they, against, the copyright extensions, right? And basically what their argument was that, hey, look, Congress has continually kept making more extensions. Therefore, it's effectively an infinite extension when it's supposed to be limited, according to the Constitution, right? And I think that was the wrong argument. No one ever makes the argument of, for the benefit of, the arts and sciences, right?
The
and clearly,
constitutional
the arts
argument?
and arts and sciences are more benefited by free access to art and information than by restricting it. And no one makes that argument because no one has any balls. But this guy is going to make that argument.
See, I wonder why no one makes that argument, because of all the argument back and forth about copyright and intellectual property and everything, that is one of the few things that is in the Constitution right there.
I am not a lawyer, but my guess, right, is that we look, us non-lawyers, we look at the Constitution, we see that line that says for the benefit, right, of the arts, right? And we look at that, and it's just the meaning is obvious to us. If a copyright law clearly does not benefit, then it should be unconstitutional. That's the way we see it. But the thing is, the actual meaning of that is not the meaning of the words that are in the Constitution. The meaning of that phrase is actually, something that has been determined by many, many court cases that we have never studied,
but you see,
like lawyers have.
Here is why.
And it actually means probably that line has no weight in court whatsoever.
No, but here's the thing with that line. All the Constitution really means is whatever it gets interpreted by when it's challenged. So if the argument were made and it made it to the Supreme Court, they're the ones who can look at that line and decide what it means.
Yeah, but the thing is, they never go against what has already been decided. It's like Jews, right? The rabbis, the really Hasidic ones, basically what they do is, they have to decide a lot of things. They're always interpreting the Bible and other, sacred texts and things to determine, what rules should be followed. For example, a rabbi, I remember, once decided that it was okay to play backgammon on Shabbos, right? And that was like, they had to figure that out, right? But the rule was, right, is that no rabbi could ever, nothing that a previous rabbi said could ever be wrong, right? So you could only really decide things that hadn't already been decided in the past. And while
Scott, it depends. See, the thing
while
is,
judges do overturn things that have been in the past, they tend not to.
Scott, you're forgetting two important factors. One, it only takes one court to rule differently, and then suddenly there's all the debate, and then people it has to be decided, the higher court, Supreme Court, whatever. Two, there's my court, my favorite court, the Ninth District Circuit Court.
Basically where all the crazy judges are?
Where all the awesome judges are.
Right, yeah. The thing is, if you look, I've been looking at what the Supreme Court's been doing recently, because, they've been doing stuff recently, and pretty much every single one of their decisions has been a total cop-out. They basically, every freaking case that's come up to them, like this year, right, has been some case with a big opportunity to make a big decision on something, right? But really, they seem to avoid the big issue that everyone is looking at. And they just judge as if it was like normal court, and they judge that specific case, according to some law, and that they're totally copping out and not, doing any decisions or changing anything.
See, I think part of it depends on how material the core issue actually is to the issue that came up, for one.
Yeah,
and two, for a lot of these issues, especially with copyright and technology, I would bet internally the court isn't sure yet, and they don't have enough to go on yet to actually.
But I mean,
decide.
look, for example, right? They recently judged about the FCC censorship thing, right? But their judgment had, didn't decide yes or no whether the FCC is allowed to censor things. It simply decided, the case at hand with that one, the person who, I forget what the actual case was, but all it did was decide that specific case and say, yes, so-and-so is, not allowed to do this or whatever. But they didn't actually decide anything about the FCC and censorship, which is what everyone, they had the opportunity to say yes or no on that. They didn't, they totally copped out, and they kept copping out, and I expect copping out to continue for a long time.
Luckily, at least one other person had balls in recent memory. Yeah, I'm sure you all remember that kerfluffle, and I've decided to use that word more often. I kind of like it.
Well, as long as every time you use kerfluffle, you have to subtract using suffice it to say.
Well, suffice it to say, there was a kerfluffle about Craigslist and erotic services, and it was that I didn't realize this guy's name. I just kind of, I knew this article, and I knew this news and all this stuff that was going on, but I finally looked at the guy's name, the South Carolina Attorney General, who went after Craigslist for having all these erotic ads. His name is Henry McMaster.
It's a pretty good name.
That is right up there with Max Power, in my opinion. Now, if only he could be like Max McPower. Henry McMax Power.
Anyway.
But Craigslist, there's this whole thing where Craigslist has these erotic ads online, and they talk about how, yes, this is for the selling of child slaves and prostitution and all this horrible stuff. And all
Actually, something interesting about Craigslist and the erotic services, right?
Yeah.
Is that, as, bad as prostitution is, and as I'm sure there was probably a lot of bad stuff in there, the thing is, legitimate and, I guess responsible, sex workers using Craigslist, they love that because it's so much safer and better for them than walking around the street with some pimps and whatnot. Some lady can live in a house, and just, have...
You're assuming it's a lady.
Well, or a guy. It doesn't matter. And they can be, a safe and responsible sex worker if you believe there is such a thing. And it's, so by taking Craigslist away, you're sort of, those people now have to go back out to the pimps and the who knows what.
But
right?
not even that. That's the fundamental kind of interesting discussion that society, and there's debate on both sides. But the gist of the issue is that this guy, McMaxPower, was going after Craigslist, and someone had balls. In fact, Craig had balls. By Craig, I mean Jim Buckmaster. Another good name. He basically lit into this guy and said everything that needed to be said. He points out every possible thing that's wrong with the argument. In the forum, sometimes you'll see someone says something kind of dumb and someone else quotes every single sentence in their quote in their post and just refutes it one by one.
Yep.
This is one of those. He points out how there's so much more sex ads and everything in the yellow pages than there are in Craigslist. And Craigslist is a lot more tame. And there were only 40 ads that were even adult at all to begin with in Craigslist in that area and all this stuff. And he basically just proves that General Henry McMaxPower, what's his name, is an idiot.
Yeah, well, really what it is when it comes to the internets or just about anything that people don't understand, right? The news or whatever brings their attention to something. It brings their attention to Craigslist. They hear about one thing, right? But because they don't really know about anything, they're ignorant and their attention has been brought to one small area. They don't see the big picture. They don't really know what they're talking about. They have no point of reference or comparison or context. So whenever idiots, it's very easy to pun them if you do have the context. And this is a case of that actually happening for Awesome.
But he got all the evidence together. There's this beautiful, you should read this. This is beautiful. He points out, quote, many prominent companies, including AT&T, Microsoft, Village Voice Media, not to mention major newspapers and other upstanding South Carolina businesses, feature more adult services ads than does Craigslist, some of which are very graphic in nature. For a small sampling, look, and then he has 11 links.
Yep.
The
thing is, he's lucky that McMasters knows how to click on a link to get punned, because most people wouldn't understand this retort even.
I am surprised that McMaxPower was able to respond to this in any capacity.
Did he respond with the appropriate apology?
I believe he did. I didn't really follow up.
I think
on
that's
this.
what I heard.
Yeah, I mostly just read the article from Buckmaster. But anyway, things of the day.
So check this out, right? You ever play Top Gun for the NES?
Perhaps.
You know how you have to land on the aircraft carrier and it's really hard?
No.
No?
Because you couldn't land on it. The game just ended there.
All right, now,
You had to start
here's
over.
something that people don't often think about, right? Is that, you have planes that land on an aircraft carrier, and how it works generally is, the jet comes down, it slows down a whole bunch. It comes down onto the deck, and they have cables on the deck, and there's a little, wire in the back of the jet that grabs onto the cables, and the cable, they basically pull the thing to a stop because there's not actually, a long enough runway for it to slow down all the way on its own. So if it misses the cables, it has to sort of bounce off the deck and take off again, right? And that's how landing on an aircraft carrier works. And it's not easy. You're in a jet that, even though it's really advanced, it goes really fast. And the aircraft carrier runway isn't exactly long, and it's not exactly wide. It's much, much easier to land on, say, a real airport or a highway, all right? Now, imagine if, right, people don't, you don't think about this, but the aircraft carrier, while big, is in the water. And while it's not going to sink on its own, it's, when the water moves, it moves. So take all the difficulty of landing on a runway. Now add on to that the difficulty of the boat moving. Now add on to that the difficulty of the boat moving a lot.
There is a simple solution, though. I mean, it's actually really easy to do. Just put on your power glove. It's so bad.
Right? No. So in this is a 2-part video. Each part is 10 minutes long. I think it's from PBS, right? And it's these guys in the military are practicing landing on a pitching deck. And basically, when you land on a pitching deck, right, the runway is going forward and backwards. So 1 second you're looking like, the boat is like angling up, like, and then the next second, like, you're looking at the back of the ship and the runway is way above you, and you're like, oh fuck. Right? And the guy talks about he was coming in for a landing, right? And they told him, stay where you are, don't move. And he's looking at the back of the boat like he's gonna crash into it and die. And then basically, the back of the boat just comes straight down and the runway's right in front of him. And he's like, oh shit. And then in the second part of the video, the second part, 10 minutes long, they do the same thing at night. So
that's like level 2.
Yeah, you can watch this, and the thing that
power
really
glove's not going to save you there. You need the U-force.
The thing that's really awesome, right, is these guys, they're basically practicing, right, and they keep failing so many times, right. Every time you fail, you just have to sort of keep going and go back up into the air again. Every time you fail, right? If you fail too often, you start running out of fuel. Jets don't, have fuel that lasts that long.
Well, there's an easy solution. You send up a fuel tanker and you refuel in the air.
They send up a fuel tanker plane to refill the jets. But now that fuel tanker has to land.
Well, clearly you send another fuel tanker up for the first fuel tanker.
Every plane on the deck is up in the air, and you're
and
starting.
There's a hole in your bucket.
They're all running out of fuel, right? And you got to land them all. So yeah, you should watch this.
So speaking of awesome, this is a photo that I think everyone should look at. I think it's very appropriate for a Monday Night Geek Nights, but a person by the name of Terry Legault took a picture of the space shuttle. No big deal. I took a picture of the space shuttle in space from the Earth
with a telescope,
with a 5-inch telescope and just a Canon digital camera while it was passing in front of the sun.
Wasn't it digital SLR?
Yes. Yes.
Not a point and shoot.
No. Yeah, cell camera actually.
Oh, okay.
It was an iPhone with one of those like strap-on lenses with the Velcro. But no, this is a picture of the space shuttle passing in front of the sun, taken by someone with a little 5-inch refracting telescope and a Canon digital camera. And not only is the picture amazing and kind of awe-inspiring, but you look at it and you zoom in the bottom right corner, you see the silhouette of a spaceship that we sent into space in front of the sun.
Damn.
Never mind the fact that we got into space in 1969 and kind of haven't done that much up there since then, but what are you going to do?
Yeah, I think the best thing we've done more recently is the little robots on Mars that are still sort of going, put.
Yeah, finding water. People forgot about Mars. Notice how Mars is not in the news.
Yeah, it's like we found water. Holy shit. We sort of knew it was there. I think that was a problem.
Yeah.
Is that we sort of knew. It's like...
It was one of those times. You were talking about how, man, I love it when people do the ballsy thing, but no one ever does. Finding water on Mars was one of those, man, science never finds out the cool thing you were hoping. You always find out the lame, expected, boring answer.
Well, I think that's a problem, is that our science has actually gotten too good, and that we sort of predict things very well. Not perfectly, but very well. So we don't have a lot of serendipitous discoveries that are, comprehensible to the public. Like, there might be serendipitous discoveries, like, with incredibly specific things that only the people in that lab really understand.
I threw the particle A into particle B, and 2 muons and a strange quark appeared. How about that?
Yeah.
What a coincidence.
Right, but there's not a lot of big serendipity really anymore, so it's...
What about synchronicity?
It's not real.
This is, though, seriously a pretty cool picture, and I have half a mind to order a giant print of it.
Do they have that option?
Let me find out. I don't see the option.
That's something that would go good in a high school wall, not in a you know
what? It might go
adult wall.
I'm thinking about buying that house, so
put in the basement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't.
I wouldn't put it in a bedroom.
I don't see that option here, but the original is big enough. I can just download it and print it myself.
Maybe.
Yeah.
You need some good printing, though.
I'll send it to the people we print our Geeknights stuff with.
Nah. All right.
So, what are we talking about tonight?
I don't know. The topic we came up with sort of vague, but basically, right, there's computer forensics, right, which is basically someone commits a crime or does something else with the computer, and then you come in afterwards or perhaps even during and investigate and try to prove what was done and by whom. And we sort of wanted to explore the idea that it's really difficult, if not next to impossible or impossible, to really do anything.
Now, the other side of this, and also what really kind of precipitated this discussion, was that whole thing with the source code to the breathalyzers and how people were fighting to, if someone's going to be convicted based on evidence created by a digital device, then the code that the digital device uses should be open source or at least subject to review by the court. And that finally happened, and the people were able to look at the code. And what they discovered was that it was some of the shittiest code ever. Like,
not a surprise.
Of course.
Well, because think about it, the breathalyzer company needs a little bit of software for this breathalyzer. Basically, read the input from this one, piece of hardware, do some math on this weak-ass
really
CPU,
bad.
and then display some numbers on a little LCD screen.
Like, as far as I can tell, it used made-up numbers as constants for calibration. And, if you did 3 readings, it would give you the average of the first 2 readings, but on the third reading, it would average the first average and the third reading. And just really bad math and bad statistics. And it brought up a lot of questions, ranging from, do we trust this sort of evidence at all, to how do you explain to a judge or even expect a judge to understand whether or not the code in the breathalyzer is legitimate? And frankly, I don't think our judicial system is in any way prepared or capable with dealing with technology at this point.
Yeah, back in the day, right? Any sort before computers or anything, before high tech, high science crimes, right? You could comprehend, any normal person could comprehend, right? Even if you needed an expert witness, the things the expert was going to explain to you were things people understood. Bullets, guns, money,
of course, Scott,
knives.
If you go far enough back,
stealing.
Well, someone was murdered here, and there's only one out-of-towner, so clearly.
Right, things, there was still always, science that people didn't understand, and it, could have gotten involved into crimes. When they had wax cylinders and someone was pirating them, and then they went to court, or lots of court things involving radio. I'm sure the judges back then didn't understand radio that well.
Well, I think the issue now is that it used to be, when it came to the forensic technology itself, even if what you were examining was difficult to understand, the methodology itself was at least fairly simple. A guy looks at it, takes a picture of it, compares 2 pictures. They can show the 2 pictures and point out, see, this part's the same as this part, with fingerprints and that sort of thing. Never mind the fact that fingerprints are terrible and unreliable, but I digress. With things like the breathalyzer, it's not obvious to anyone but an expert what's even wrong with the software, and also, the software is not in any way really material to the case at hand. It's just the software to take the input from the forensic device and translate it into something people can understand. If even that portion of every piece of evidence gathering has to be subject to the scrutiny, how are the courts going to possibly deal with that?
Yeah, really, you just need judges that are specialized at computers. You would need to get computer science, people with also law degrees, to decide all these cases, because no one else would be equipped. Sure, the judges are obviously making decisions, but are they really equipped to mete out justice in a way that is morally acceptable? To decide the fates of, people and companies and citizens, is that really right? If they, basically, if they don't understand it, how can you say it's right?
And even that aside, let's say that we have all these forensic devices. The interesting good side effect of this might be that we've got a proof of concept of the fact that many eyes solve problems quickly. The fact that it was so trivial to point out all the horrendous flaws with the software just by opening it up to review. Hopefully we can use this as a push or maybe a legal precedent that all forensic software has to be open.
That's okay. The problem is, right, there's a point at which, if someone is even moderately intelligent, that no amount of forensic software can do anything. You can always, right, with the real world, right, it's not always, you can get away with crimes, but it's not always trivial. With computers, with even the slightest amount of effort, it is trivial to eliminate all reasonable doubt, even in the most heinous of situations.
Well, let's see. Here's a good example. I'm just thinking of, how could we actually go about this? This is
like,
all
imagine, here's the analogy, right, to the real world. Let's say you were going to commit computer murder, right? You
Wait,
basically
murdering a computer or murdering someone via a computer?
No, basically, right? Imagine if...
is this like I'm typing /kill in an IRC channel?
Imagine if somebody could go out into the street and commit mass murder, just like hose a bunch of people down with a machine gun, and then with a snap of their fingers, all the evidence immediately disappears, and there's just this incredible mountain of reasonable doubt. That's what it's like with computers. You can hack and hack and hack and steal and credit card and all the evil things that you can do with a computer, erase people's hard drives and take, all right? And then with a click, if you're just any amount of intelligence, there'll be absolutely no evidence and no reasonable doubt whatsoever, and no amount of forensics or even the, smart people like us or smart people even smarter than us, no one will ever be able to get anything on you, even though it'll be obvious to them that you did it. They'll have no way to actually prove it or have any amount of evidence to demonstrate it.
Well, like the example I wanted to bring up was, say I wanted to, pull the Craigslist, bait and switch, ruin someone's house scam. That simple thing.
All right.
Where, you post a Craigslist ad saying, hey, come to my house and take all my stuff. I'm moving out, something crazy. And of course, you're basically just instigating a mob of idiots who are overly credulous to go and destroy someone else's house, which in and of itself is difficult to track. Now, if you really wanted to get away with this, think, all right, I buy what, like a netbook or like on eBay with some shady account and traveler's checks or a shady PayPal account, or maybe even just in cash at like a swap meet. I buy like an old netbook or an old laptop, take it to like a Starbucks in the winter. I'm wearing a mask, make the post from there, and then just throw away the laptop. What are you going to do?
You don't even need to go that far, right? All you do...
No, but I'm talking about, look, like... If you really want to get away with something, it's the old,
it's even easier than that.
7 proxies.
It's even easier than that. You just use Tor, and then you post a Craigslist, and, you go get some, like, Hotmail account, just disposable or whatever, and that's it.
Or, think about all the possibility of taking old netbooks or laptops, putting a RAM disk in, or having no hard drive at all, just like a Linux live CD that's booted. You boot it, you run your software that's doing whatever evil you want it to do, and it's hooked up to like a free wireless at a Starbucks or just like some house. Like you put the battery, it's not even plugged into anything. You just got wireless and a battery, and you put like 10 of those IBM keep your laptop going for 4 more hours batteries on it. You stick it in a box, you hide it in the bushes. It can be online doing your evil for days and days and days and days and days. And if someone finds it, they just find a box with a laptop that's running in it, or possibly dead by now, a bunch of batteries, no fingerprints of any kind, and if they find it while it's still running, what are they going to do? Are they going to realize that if they turn it off or reboot it, everything's gone?
Yeah, everything's in RAM, right? So you turn it off, you just all the information you may have been able to get out of it, see what program it was running, it's gone. So now you don't even know, no one even knows that computer was doing anything evil.
Go
right?
one step further, have a mercury switch. If it moves, turn it off.
Yeah, you could do that too.
Great, not done.
And see, and these kinds of ideas, right, which eliminate all the evidence, right, are sort of crazy. You don't even need to go anywhere near that far, right? Most people just, put a virus out there, get an army of zombie computers, and that's it. And what can you do about it? As long as you don't try to have some sort of centralized server where the zombies get updates from or anything. You just have to control them from some, spot where no one can, get you, and that's it.
But at the same time, there are a lot of... See, what it really comes down to is that in order to actually get people or, dig up what information there would be, because luckily computers do make a lot of evidence, but they're not the kind of evidence that a judge or a lawyer or anyone who's not technical is going to understand right away or even realize exists. And it's kind of the same way that recently they have caught a lot of these big stock or money laundering scams, is that you have to do statistical analysis of interlinked data. Like the example people always put up is that, say I'm downloading, uploading music or doing whatever shady thing I'm doing from, I don't know, my wireless access point or someone else's wireless access point. And the access point is open. So there is definitely by default this clear reasonable doubt that you can't prove that I was using the access point to do this as opposed to someone else.
Yep.
But if I'm the judge and I know what's going on, I get a warrant, you may not be able to prove that. But there's enough interlinked data. I'm talking like TCP sequence numbers or rights to a file system or rates of rights to the file system or, files have all these different creation dates. And even though theoretically each individual creation date or modified date or SE Linux or all these things could be modified or altered by a hacker, just like how a hacker could, bust into the server, change the log, showing that they weren't even there and then leave. At the same time, falsifying data like that is effectively impossible unless you can generate truly random numbers on the fly and make those random numbers consistent across the board in multiple sources, many of which you don't have access to. I mean, what was that? There was an article on Slashdot about analyzing the first digits of numbers and prime numbers, and there's certain correlations.
Yeah, the thing is,
real data will have certain correlations that if you're making up numbers to match other data, those correlations won't exist, and you can statistically say that data was manipulated.
The thing is with that, right, is, while it is true that if you want to be, mathematically 100%, no evidence, that you do have to go and do the kinds of things that you're talking about.
What I'm saying is that you can't.
But even if you just manipulated the dates, like just by hand using like touch, that's enough to get away with it. No one can.
Well, no, it depends on what's going on. What I'm saying is that there are ways to there is the possibility of computer forensics that I, as a professional, would say will hold up in court, are reliable, they'll work.
Oh, yeah, it would hold up, assuming that the other person was not smart.
Not necessarily, Scott. I think you're
So what are you
going to
do when someone encrypts their whole drive? What are you going to do?
Well, see, if someone actually encrypted their drive, we have the separate legal problem of can we or can we not compel someone to reveal their encryption key?
And even if they did reveal the encryption key, how would you know that was the real one?
Well, you see, with deniable encryption, it's all well and good in theory, but all right, what is this? This is like my personal computer. So what? So say I'm going after your browsing habits. So what? You've encrypted your drive?
Yeah, the whole thing.
All right. So if I decrypted, the odds of you having an extensive file system and browsing history that is up to date and passes muster in a statistical analysis, and yet at the same time is completely fake, as opposed to the real actual one that you've encrypted and hidden somewhere.
The odds are low, but it's possible.
Possible? Remember, you don't have to prove in court beyond a shadow of a doubt. You only have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And statistical analysis, that's how statistics works. You can say things like, we are 95% sure that the true value of X is between Y and Z. So there are forensic techniques in IT and CS, especially in IT, that can get around reasonable doubt. The problem is, I don't think our legal system is capable of even addressing or I don't think they can even get close to that sort of analysis.
Yeah, basically all they've got right now is, there's a bunch of tools that are basically approved for use by, computer cops. And one of them, for example, I think it's called In Case. I don't know if that's the actual name of it. I forget. But all this thing does is they basically take a hard drive. They take the hard drive out of your computer. They put it in an evidence bag, right?
Wait, now, if I was running my Linux Live CD with nothing on the hard drive, they're already fucked.
Of course. They take their hard drive back to their, lab, right? They copy the hard drive. That way, the original one goes in the evidence locker untouched. That way, they can prove that, the one that they're using to do the tests on wasn't changed from what the original one was, right? So they copy your hard drive. They keep the original unchanged. So they evidence, right? Then they run this software on the copied one. And what it does is it examines the file system on the low level and, looks for deleted files and all that sort of stuff. And then they just examine files, looking for child porn, looking for, emails of your, conspiracy or, all the sort of normal, everyday kind of stuff that you would, use to get someone. The thing is, right, if you use like ZFS, you'll probably get away with it, right? I mean, I doubt that their software can handle all the weird file systems that are out there.
Well, Scott, but at the same time, all the issues like this are from technological standpoint at least, are easily surmounted by just good methodology.
Yeah. The thing is, they don't even have that.
But what I'm saying is that they could, and that a lot of technology people on Slashdot and everything will make statements like there's no way ever, or because the information is digital and can be created, modified, altered, the prosecution could just change the data and there'd be no actual way to prove 100% that the data wasn't manipulated, even with good methodology, because it's digital.
Well, that's true. There's no way to prove 100%.
Well, yeah, but
in 99% of cases, that's the dude's hard drive, all right? He didn't encrypt for shit. He was a moron. That's what it is.
No, but basically right now, smart people can get away with any technology crime they want as long as they're smart. But there are methodologies that could easily get people and make this entire thing a moot point. I mean, really, there's so much interlinked pieces of data in hard drives and software that you can really reliably statistically prove whether or not the hard drive that someone gave you that is decrypted is the one they actually use or not. And while you can have theoretically deniable encryption, the majority of people will not be capable of maintaining the deniably encrypted partition in such a manner that it is actually 100% deniable.
Yeah, but what are you going to do about stuff that's coming up? Like the next version of Firefox is private browsing mode, right? Where basically you browse, but it doesn't write any browser history or anything to any drive anywhere at any time when you're in private mode. So I just put the browser in private mode and I do all this stuff, and it looks like I've never used this computer, right? Because my browsing history is like 100 years old. All it has is getfirefox.com.
See, at that point, you have to go for the interlinked data. You have to go for if they saved any files on the disk, which they might have, depending on what they're doing.
Yeah, but there's no cache, right? We can get into this sort of stuff where there's basically no
Scott,
data on my drive. Everything is in this cloud.
Forensics can still, in many cases, get things like that. For example, all right, by default, you've got all this set up, but what if you don't have a lot of RAM and stuff gets swapped? And then it's left in the swap file.
It's possible.
Things like that can happen. Plus, you have to go for the other data. You have to go for the access times, connections to other places, maybe, get a wiretap in the old school way and watch the browsing.
Yeah, you need to warrant and get the wiretap beforehand. But, a lot of the forensics, right? Forensics is usually, after the fact, not the, the other stuff is more like the...
Well, at least in computers, it's also, while you're doing it, maintain a verifiable trail. I mean, you have to, if the file access times and all these things, all the things in the file system and all the metadata and all the checksums and everything don't match up at every step of the way, you basically lose all your evidence.
Yep. But I'm just saying there's a difference between these sort of, there's a suspect and you're staking him out and tapping his wire and waiting to get him. There's a difference between that police activity and the police activity of we've arrested someone, we're investigating the scene of the crime, collecting evidence.
But even if you have the discipline it takes to have, I guess I would call it deniable computing as a whole, is even if we have technology that does most of it for you, it's still so difficult and so annoying to do that people just won't do it.
No, people aren't going to do it. That's why that's why the police are able to get away with their crappy forensics that they use now, because 99% of the time, no one encrypts or does anything to protect themselves in any way whatsoever, and their stuff works just fine on those people. It works great on those people. That's why they find all this child porn, because child porn guys don't know what to,
Well, like how many times do they catch someone like a husband murdered his wife or a wife murdered his husband with antifreeze, and they go to the house and they just find in the Firefox history like Googling for antifreeze poisoning.
Yeah, right? I mean, there's so far of all the stories I've heard of people getting stopped at the border or caught for this or that, only one guy who was probably a child pornographer had his drive encrypted and wouldn't give up the password. One. Out of all this time, only one person, was a child pornographer and was also smart enough to use encryption that they couldn't do anything about. So, that's why the cops haven't stepped up their game. But what's going to happen when all the child pornographers are that smart? It's going to be
Will they ever be, though? They're child pornographers.
I know this, but it would be really bad news because there's nothing stopping them from doing it.
Well, it's more, even if the technology steps up, I feel like the judicial system itself is not going to keep up. Even if the forensics gets up and we've got, expert witnesses and awesome people setting this stuff up, we're going to get to the point to where the evidence that would be presented in court on any level, in order to be actually viable or evidence that I would accept as a professional, there's no way a judge could understand it. Judges are, I think, becoming even more and more at the mercy of expert witnesses.
And here's something else, right? Is
but
the amount of expertise required to collect this evidence, right, would just be so much larger. You basically wouldn't be able to collect any evidence unless you paid $1 bajillion to have basically geniuses collect it.
Well, see, if you make good methodology, then all you can get some fairly low-paid, unskilled people to enact the methodology, provided you make good enough tools.
That's true, but those tools are going to be very expensive tools.
The expensive part is not going to be getting the data. I think the expensive part is going to be explaining the data to people in court. And I guess the only way to go about it is to, if a certain specific methodology is used enough, then it'll be accepted in court and you won't have to prove that it works again.
No, you won't. But, the point is...
But I think the problem with that, because that seems to be how a lot of stuff works now, but going forward, the methodology is going to change like between or during court cases.
Yeah, that's true. Things move fast, so it's not going to be like, the same, fingerprinting, techniques, they don't really, how much they change, right?
I guess I kind of want to talk, do a show about the details of this, like how to actually get data off of a computer or something like that.
Hope it's not encrypted, don't edit it when you copy it.
What was the guy in Slashdot?
About the file system read only.
He said something like, what's the fastest way to break someone's encryption? And the answer was a crowbar, some duct tape.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. You just, if you can't get
Jack Bauer.
If you can't get the person to cooperate, that's it. Game over.
We still need to answer the question once and for all if you have to cooperate when it comes to passwords.
I think it's the Fifth Amendment. You don't. If it's in your mind, you don't have to say anything.
Yeah, but it's always bothered me a little bit that you can automatically, no matter what, always get out of having to reveal anything just by saying you forgot, because there's no way yet to prove that you forgot.
That's true, too.
And also, the interesting thing, I think with brain scans and MRI, I think in the future, we will be able to either, like, I could foresee there was a Superman way back. I watched on Nick at Night when I was a kid. And they had a psychic donkey. Follow me on this, okay?
Which Superman was this?
Just follow me. It was the old black and white live-action Superman.
I never heard of that. All right, anyway.
Really? Okay, so just bear with me on this. So they had this psychic donkey that could read people's minds. So they decide to rob a bank. And they rob the bank, and they got the bank teller, and they tie him up to a chair, and he's like, I'm not going to give you the combination to the safe. And the guys are like, don't worry, we got this. They bring the psychic donkey in, and they look at the guy, and they say, think about the combination to the safe. And he can't not think about it.
Of course not.
I mean, rim riding the sex machine, there it goes. You can't stop that. You can't unsee that.
You can't unsee
what has been seen.
Yes.
So
it's you've seen it. You can't unsee it.
But what do we do when we get to the point to where we can scan someone's brain and tell them, think about your password, and then we can just see their password in their brain?
What are you gonna do? I don't know. Is that okay? Are we gonna allow that? I don't think the Constitution has anything. Is that a search and see? Do you need a warrant for that? Is it okay?
I think you need a warrant for that.
But is it okay even with a warrant to do that?
My shooting from the hip opinion is that one, you need one fucking warrant, but two, it should be okay.
Right, but then doesn't that completely eliminate the Fifth Amendment? Because even if you won't, even if you refuse, you have the right to remain silent. Well, they're sort of forcing you to be silent because you can't stop
thinking. But at the same time, it's just extant information. It is. It's not like, it's not like.
It is true.
You don't have to tell them.
I know.
They're going, you're good. It's there anyway. It's just, it's like if I wrote I'm guilty on my forehead and then I signed it.
Yep. It's tough.
Of course, then we get into a lot of Oshi or Shiro territory.
That's the kind of territory this inevitably leads, which makes me think maybe we should end this episode.
This has been Geeknights with Rim and Scott. Special thanks to DJ Pretzel for the opening music.
Be sure to visit our website at www.frontrowcrew.com, where you'll find show notes, links, our awesome forum, a link to our Frapper map, and links to all the RSS feeds.
We say feeds plural because Geeknights airs 4 nights a week, covering 4 different brands of geekery. Mondays are science and technology. Tuesdays, we have video games, board games, and RPGs. Wednesdays are anime, manga, comic nights. And Thursdays are the catch-alls for various rants and tomfoolery.
You can send us feedback by email to geeknights@frontrowcrew.com. Or you can send audio feedback via Odeo. Just click the link that says Send Me an Audio on the right side of our website.
If you like what you hear, you can catch the last 100 episodes in iTunes or in your favorite podcatcher. For the complete archives, visit the website, which has everything.
Geeknights is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 2.5 license. This means you can do whatever you want with it as long as you give us credit, don't make money, and share it in kind. Geeknights is recorded live with no studio and no audience. But unlike those other late shows, it's actually recorded at night.